despite having the reputation that I have, despite having done the work that I've done for the last 15 years, I still experience that, what do you do anyway, Melissa? Or you don't have the technical knowledge. And it's always a little bit disheartening because people don't realize that they're underestimating what I'm capable of. I know that not everybody can do what I did, but everyone has their own story to forge and their own path to forge. And I think if one thing this journey has taught me is there is no right way to get here, and it doesn't have to be the same path, but then just run with it.
Can you imagine a family selling their car so they could choose how to move through the city on their own terms? My guest proves that stories, lived experience, and courage can change how the world moves. Hello and welcome to The Human City, the podcast about cities that serve people, not just infrastructure. I'm your host Ruchita Bansal. Today I'm joined by Melissa Bruntlett, internationally recognized voice on sustainable mobility. She is a globally recognized writer, advocate, and storyteller who inspires us to rethink the way we design and move through our cities. She co-founded Modacity in Vancouver and has co-authored 3 books. In this episode, we'll explore her journey on how moving from Vancouver to Delft unlocked everyday freedom, how she turned experiences into global advocacy by balancing storytelling with technical work, and why she believes mobility is about people. Melissa, welcome to the Human City podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. Melissa, you were never trained as an urban planner, yet you've become a global voice in mobility. What personal experience most inspired your journey?
Oh, that's a great question, Ruchita. About 15 years ago in Vancouver, I was getting around on foot, bicycle, and public transport with my then 1 and 3-year-old child. We sold our family car and started getting around more actively. When we were cycling around by bike, I started to notice how much more connected I felt to the city, but also how connected they were starting to be as they grew up as well. And so that sort of inspired me to share my story. Also because a lot of people were asking how was I making it work, getting around actively with 2 small children. So that's sort of where everything began, is just sharing how easy it was for us, but also all those intangible qualitative benefits that came from moving around. And it sparked an interest in other people and has just grown leaps and bounds from there in terms of sharing cycling stories from around the world, and eventually now sharing stories of city building, urbanism, and a slower city, a more human scale city is really good for everyone.
When you and Chris started Modacity, it went beyond consultancy and became storytelling as activism. What's the story behind taking that leap and building a platform for other voices too?
So for us, Modacity came from an invitation to come and speak about our experiences. And we sort of were drawn to take these stories and represent them through video, photography, writing in a way that could inspire people. It started out sharing stories from people getting around, mainly on bicycle, but shifting that a little bit to talk also about public transportation and good walkable neighborhoods. For us, it's always been about showing how lives are positively impacted by what we're doing. So in Vancouver, how the bike lanes were making it possible for more people to get on bikes, but not just the average 25 to 60-year-old, but also children and older adults, how it was making it more inclusive for women. And we know, again, that all of these challenges exist. What we wanted to do was to balance that narrative to make sure that it wasn't just doing wrong, that we need to do better. There's room for improvement.
Your 5-week trip to Netherlands converted into a book. So how did that thought really come that now this needs to become a book?
Yeah, the first book, Building the Cycling City, was all about learning from the Netherlands. We visited 5 cities: Rotterdam, Eindhoven, Utrecht, Amsterdam, and Groningen. We were supposed to write 5 long-form articles. We always felt like there was so much still to tell, so much nuance that was still there. Just because the Netherlands has been doing this for 50 years doesn't mean that Vancouver, Montreal, Delhi couldn't start somewhere and build from there. So we pitched the idea to a few publishers and they said, sure, we'd love to tell your story, but we want to see how North American cities are also applying these things, where they're learning from each other. So that was really where Building the Cycling City came from, taking the 10 lessons that we found from the city level to really say, yes, it happened in the Netherlands in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Doesn't mean it can't happen elsewhere.
And that was the time you shifted from Vancouver to Delft. That must have been transformative. Talk about the first day that captured the contrast between the Dutch and Canadian everyday life.
Yeah. Well, so on that trip in 2016, we watched as our kids experienced the first level of independence that they weren't experiencing in the same way in Vancouver. They were 7 and 9 at the time. And on that trip, we decided, hey, there's a playground down the street. We're okay with you walking there. The traffic is almost non-existent, so we're not worried about that. And we saw them really enjoy and flourish in that experience of autonomy. And when with that, and with our own experiences of moving around on two wheels and in much calmer spaces, we said as a family to come live in the Netherlands and work for the Dutch Cycling Embassy. And we packed up everything that we could in 8 suitcases and a cat on a shoulder bag. And yeah, in February of 2019, left Vancouver, arrived in Delft, and immediately had this feeling this was the right move. The street that we're standing on was super quiet. There were people outside walking and cycling. There were people around. Moving around was really seamless. Just walking into the city center was this joyful experience because you're walking past children and older adults. You're cycling next to each other. You're seeing so much diversity of people moving around. The kids are thriving so early on. And we also felt ourselves just feel a sense of calm. So we didn't need to drive anymore because we didn't decide to bring a car with us or purchase a car when we got here. And just going to the grocery store was suddenly this really enjoyable experience where Chris and I could catch up on our day and relax in this environment.
My follow up question was that how did it shape your understanding of urban inclusivity and transfer? But I guess you very nicely answered that. After publishing your first book, you suddenly found yourself on world stages. Was there an audience reaction or encounter that made you realize your story had become bigger than you imagined?
Oh, such a great question. I don't think it's any one particular moment, but I think it's these comments or questions or just people that come up to us and say, I've been following you for years and I find what you do really inspiring. It always feels a little bit strange when it happens because, like I said at the beginning, we were just a young couple with 2 kids that decided to try something different, and we're just sharing stories, and we're just sharing the remarkable that seems unremarkable to a lot of people. And so it's sort of inspiring, but it's humbling also because I think that a lot of the people that we meet tell us how much impact our stories have had on their choice of career path or their willingness to go into advocacy to fight for something better. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily one moment that was super surprising, but it's nice to know that the work that we're is making an impact on people.
Your second book, The Curbing Traffic, is about the human case for fewer cars. Was there a story that convinced you to center people's emotional and social experiences and not just infrastructure in your work?
Yeah, it was very much our family story that sort of set us on this path. How has the experience of moving here changed the experiences for our children? How has it changed my experience as a woman in terms of navigating the city? But then also finding those stories. We had this wonderful neighbor across the way. He's still around. I say was. We just don't live on that street anymore. His name was Peter. And for us, I didn't feel right telling the story of an older adult. And so knowing Peter, knowing that he still only got around by bicycle, how he bumps into friends, neighbors, children he taught, and their children, because he's been doing it for generations, how that has really helped him feel a part of the community. Speaking to our friend Maya, who is disabled, she has multiple sclerosis, and understanding her experience, because again, I can't speak for the disabled community in terms of how this kind of environment helps them. So it was good for us to talk to someone like Maya. And ultimately what this is there are infrastructure comparisons looking at the policies that help to realize the city that we lived in. But really what we wanted to do was hopefully help inspire people that don't live in environments like this of why it is important to invest in child-friendly policies, why we need to think about the level of noise in our cities and that the impact that has, why we need to value green spaces and nature in cities in terms of their therapeutic qualities, and then hopefully use that to inspire people. And it seems to have struck a chord with a lot of people, which is really wonderful. And, our story is just one of many stories. But it was really about sharing not just the how, but also why it's so important. Because if we don't understand the why, then the how is irrelevant. the infrastructure, the policy, the planning, the thinking better if we understand who we're impacting with every decision.
Storytelling can be as powerful as data because it shows emotions and it shows personal experiences. So can you share a time when someone's perspective or a city's policy changed because of what you're doing?
Sure. There's a young woman named Keisha Mayuga. She used to live in Manila in the Philippines. Now she lives in Berlin. And I had the opportunity to connect with her through work I was doing with Women Mobilize Women. And our focus with that organization was to help support building a network of women working in transport around the world. And Keisha in Manila, she helped to spearhead the first pop-up bike lanes in that city. She revealed that it was actually some of our content, our storytelling, that helped to inspire her to see what could be possible. And that is still a growing movement in Manila and elsewhere in the Philippines in terms of building out for cycling. So for me, that was super humbling to know that my work had reached so far away, and it's a place that I hadn't necessarily thought of as a potential cycling city. I felt really nice to know that we were able to have a little bit of impact there.
Your new book, Women Changing Cities, collects global stories of women leading urban transformation. So what sparked this project, and was there any story that moved you on a personal level?
Working with Women Mobilize Women broadened my knowledge of what's happening around the world in terms of women changemakers in transport. And the work on the book, Remarkable Feminist Voices, it helped to highlight so many stories that I didn't know existed that were really inspirational, like the story of Keisha, like Anwar Aristani and what happened in Tirana. And then at the same time, around then, I also had the opportunity to travel to Bogota in Colombia as a part of a sustainable transport week there, or sustainable mobility week. And then suddenly I'm introduced to all of these women working in her cabinet. That was Mayor Claudia Lopez. And you had a woman running the Department for Transportation, the Department for Housing, the Department for Environment, the Department for Women, obviously. And then we went out into the city. We experienced cycling as a group in the more developed areas, but we also went to lesser developed areas, but more informal communities, more low-income communities. And what I saw there was that transformation that was happening, not just because of Mayor Lopez. Of course, there was a few decades of inspiration and cycling advocacy that was happening well before that council and that coalition was there. But to see people of all ages cycling on these bike lanes that are in places that would be not first thought of as a place for a cycling lane in my North American context anyways. And for me, there was this moment, I've got someone that was also on the trip has me on camera being like, oh my God, it's a baby, because I'm so used to seeing moms and dads cycling with babies here in the Netherlands, but anywhere else in the world, I've never seen that before. And that moment for me sort of like just solidified, I need to tell this story of transformation. I need to find where this is happening and why it's happening. And while we were thinking about it, that we realized that a lot of the transformation in 2020 to 2022 was being led by women. You had Bogota, Tirana, Manila, Montreal, Barcelona, bike lanes happening in Uganda, and of course, Paris. I know that there are plenty of cities where transformation happens because men are in charge, but what was making the news were cities led by women. And we wanted to understand if there was some sort of magic ingredient or something that was helping that be realized. And that was really the inspiration for the book, is picking 11 case studies and speaking to the women that are doing the hard work to make their cities better places, not just for them, but for every citizen in the city.
As one of the most influential women in transport, can you recount a time when you were dismissed or underestimated on how you navigated, the work you're doing?
Yeah, despite having the reputation that I have, despite having done the work that I've done for the last 15 years, I still, in certain circles, experience that, what do you do anyway, Melissa? Or maybe this isn't quite for you. You don't have the technical knowledge. And it's always a little bit disheartening because people don't realize that they're underestimating what I'm capable of, because there's this preconditioned idea of who a urbanist should be, who someone working in urban planning should be. And I think what has been the proof for me, I've had so many opportunities come my way in terms of being able to work with NGOs, consultancies, cities, research agencies. And they might not be huge projects, but they're projects that have an impact. And for me, that's what's most important. But what I have come to understand is that it's about sticking to what we know, what we want to do, And sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it won't. And it's not easy by any stretch. But for me, it's always been about having that set of values and sticking to it.
In Europe, there is already a very big community of people working in mobility. So, do you think that challenges for women who work in mobility are different, in Europe and elsewhere, or are they universal?
I think there's a lot of universal challenges for sure. What's interesting and what we talk about in Women Changing Cities is that in Europe, we have this, in North America as well, I would say, we have this perception that we fixed everything and we have equality now. And women still make up 25% of high level positions out of the 75 other percent that are men. We're still a minority in North America and in Europe in terms of women that are leading organizations, leading cities. And so it means that there's still work to be done. And then of course there's the experiences of harassment, of belittling. Women still doing the most bulk of the care work. And so we have a great understanding of how people moving with children are going to move through a city, how children on their own will move, how older adults will move, because we get old as well. It happens. And so we have all this wealth of information, and that's sort of overlooked. And there is still that fear of harassment, whether verbal or sexual harassment. It holds a lot of women back, and it leads to a lot of assumptions. And so the problems are there, but then what I see is that in some parts of the world that we wouldn't suspect, they're actually moving ahead in terms of creating more equity. They have more gender responsive policies within organizations, within governments, to make sure that women have the ability to stay. But what's been most eye-opening but most beneficial is being a part of Women Mobilize Women, being connected with these women around the world. We're creating our own networks.
You just mentioned about India and you visited India just a month back. Please share your experience.
This was my very first trip to India, and I went to Delhi. I was invited there by the Global Network for Popular Transport as a part of a deep dive into what is popular transport, how does it function in India, how can other places learn from it. So for those that aren't aware, popular transport is another name for informal transport that is run by people for people. So not run by transport agencies or the government, but rather organized by the people itself to fill a gap that exists in the system. It was an intensive 6 days of just experiencing a different way of being. And it was sort of a twofold experience. There's a lot of really inspiring work that's happening in the grassroots and NGO level to help to shift Delhi from a very car-focused city to one that's a little more responsive to people that are moving on foot. I went and met with the Rahagiri Foundation, and they were showing me a project that they worked on in Gurgaon of creating a walking and biking path around where their offices are, because they recognized there was no space for walking or cycling there. And they're seeing incredible numbers in the number of people that are using it to get to and from work. So pointing out this latent demand for more active, and also learning about popular transport and seeing how so many people use it to fill that last mile solution. Walking is not quite safe enough yet, neither is cycling. And so these modes exist to really support that. And I think it's fascinating. So how can we use this as an inspiration? And then, just the number of people I met while I was there who are really trying to make Delhi and other parts of India much more accessible, not necessarily follow the same broken patterns of North America and Europe, but find new patterns that make sense for India.
Melissa, you have worn many hats: author, consultant, global speaker, and mother. Can you share a time when when these roles collided in unexpected?
Yeah, I probably, when we did our first book tour in Australia, New Zealand with our kids were actually involved in what we did. So on several occasions, they actually spoke of their experiences as well. Our daughter talked about the freedom that she experienced when she was in the Netherlands versus when she was home, how she was frustrated. Our son similarly talking about being able to cycle with friends as opposed to always having mom and dad chaperone him around. And it helped in two ways. One, it shows that what I'm talking about when I'm talking about my kids, it's not just me putting that on my children. It is their experience. And so to know that we're on the right path is good. But then also knowing that they can see the world this way too. Once you pull back the curtain, when it comes to urbanism, cycling, you can't pull that curtain back. You can't unsee what you've seen. But I think what it's meant for our kids at that time and in the years since is they have an appreciation for cities that make it possible for them to enjoy the world on their terms, not on someone else's.
So, if someone is listening, a planner or an urban designer or from this field, what story from your journey would you share to encourage them that anyone can help shape better cities?
Great question. I think the beginning, my origin story in a way, I studied fashion design. I moved to the city of Vancouver when my eldest was a year old. A year and a half later, I had my second. And so I was largely a stay-at-home mom, working part-time here and there. And it was just, yeah, just trying something new and realizing that cycling could work for us. It never really starts big thinking I'm going to become this global voice. I was like, no, I'm going to change a crosswalk on my kids' way to school, and I'm going to make getting to school better for them and for their classmates. And it just snowballed out of control from there. We all have things that we can do, stories we can tell, actions we can take that can change our cities for the better for more people. But it's having the courage to know that somebody wants to listen to you somewhere, even if it's just at a coffee with a friend, and not being afraid to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation to do so. I know that not everybody can do what I did, but everyone has their own story to forge and their own path to forge. And I think if one thing this journey has taught me is there is no right way to get here, and it doesn't have to be the same path, but then just run with it. Who knows what'll happen.
Thank you so much, Melissa, taking us through your journey from those early days of telling your family story to reshaping how cities across the world think about mobility. What really stand out is how your work reminds us that cities are not just about roads or vehicles, they are about people, their stories, and their right to move freely and safely. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll find the links to Melissa's books in the description. They're an inspiring read if you would like to dive deeper into her work. To everyone listening, I hope this conversation sparks something in you. Whether it is noticing the streets you walk on, questioning how safe and inclusive your city feels, or realizing that your own story has the power to create change. At the Human City, that's what we believe. Cities thrive when people thrive. In this, if this episode moved you, please share it with someone who cares about building better cities. Subscribe on Spotify and YouTube so you can join us for more conversations like this. And send us your thoughts or guest suggestions at the given email ID. Thank you for being here, and until next time, keep imagining and building cities that put people first.